Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Eldon, and with me is Dalton. Hey, you're not Dalton. Who are you?
I'm John Vorderbreuggen. I'm a level 1 from Bay City, Michigan, and right now I'm on the road towards building towards L2, and I am absolutely ecstatic to be here helping out with the stream today, and I look forward to getting to speak about our topic today.
All right, so this is a special guest broadcast. We have John here all the way up from Michigan, so round of applause for John for coming all the way out here. We really appreciate him coming out to share his knowledge with us about this very important topic. So as some of you probably should know, if you follow at Judging News on Twitter, you definitely know this because we posted about it when it came out. Wizards has repealed their long-standing ban on alcohol at Magic tournaments, and there are a lot of people, I'm sure, that are really interested in what that means for them and for their store. And so for our broadcast today, we are going to be talking about some of the consequences of that, some of the best practices that us judges can use when we're running events where alcohol is going to be present. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of different stuff that's related to that issue. And so I'm really excited. John's really excited about it. So let's get to know you a little bit better, John. Are you a lawyer?
No, I am not, actually.
Me neither. So that is a very important point for tonight's broadcast, which is that neither of us are lawyers. Neither of us is qualified to give legal advice of any kind. So while we can talk about best practices and what's a good idea to do versus not a good idea to do, neither of us is qualified to give advice of a legal character. So for that type of thing, you would want to consult a competent professional, which neither of us is. And that is my disclaimer for the night is be sure to not take the word of some guy on the internet for when you're dealing with situations where you might end up in court. So that's now that we've got that out of the way, we can talk about what you are. So you're not a lawyer. What kind of special experience do you have in connection with the topic that we're going to be discussing tonight?
So my experience comes from being the risk management head of my fraternity for over a year. And that has brought about a lot of different experiences for me with how to deal with intoxicated persons and those who have a tendency to act out when they drink. And because of this experience, I am now better equipped to handle situations, and I would like to pass this information on to y'all.
Well, that's excellent, and it's important to note that having a fraternity background is definitely something that might give someone a lot of opportunities to interact with intoxicated individuals, but especially having a background in risk assessment and risk management for an organization like that's certainly something that we could definitely use some opinions on. So, all right, the first thing that I was going to ask about is what are some of the most important things to be aware of if you're working at an event where alcohol is going to be served?
So the first big thing, and this was posted with the policy change and the original announcement, was that Wizards is now allowing age-restricted events. And these can vary from 21 and up to being any age or 16 and younger, things like any age-restricted event that the store sees fit. When alcohol is being served, you genuinely want to err on the side of caution and have your events be 21 and up, because you don't want to be caught with children in an area with open alcohol, because that can lead to some very dangerous situations and a not too fun legal time.
Yeah, so a note for those of you who are international viewers, in the United States, the legal drinking age is 21. For all of the lovely freedoms that our country loves to talk about, that is not one of them. And that is something that you can get in some serious trouble with if you are caught giving alcohol to a minor or facilitating a minor, who in this case would be someone who's under the age of 21. Do not trifle with those people, because the ATF will shut you down in a real big hurry.
Absolutely. And a couple of other important notes on the topic as well is that when you're restricting the age of events, make sure it's being advertised as such, and that way everybody knows and has a clear understanding of what is going on for these events. And that needs to go in between judge staff, actual staff of the store, and to the players themselves.
Yeah, that would be kind of an awkward situation if someone were to show up for like a 1K, for example, and shuffle up and, hey, by the way, we're not going to be able to let you in. So especially if someone was going to be potentially traveling a significant distance to get out here. Now, I actually, my house is a 21 and up zone. So are you 21?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
So
I'm good.
I didn't mention that before he drove out here, but.
Whew, scaring me. And then another thing to mention on the topic is talking about premier level play events, which are PPTQs and up. These events cannot be age restricted. They have to be available to all ages. So alcohol, no matter what, cannot be served at the event. However, there are some weird little caveats that can go on with this. So specifically, if you're holding an event at a venue where alcohol can be served, it just can't be in the play. The alcohol cannot be in the play area. However, you can go to the bar and grab a drink, no problem. Just don't bring it back to the play area. Please be respectful about that.
Now that's a Wizards policy. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah. So in addition, your own locality might have its own extra rules as far as stuff like that is concerned. So be sure to consult someone who would know what those rules are.
Correct. Something kind of cool as well is that there have been a couple events up in Michigan held in Frankenmuth at the Bavarian Inn where alcohol could be served. It just couldn't be in the premises of the PBTQ that we were holding. And there was also an IQ going on that day as well. And alcohol could be allowed in that event because that is not considered a premier level play event, which is rather interesting to note.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'll be very, very much keeping an eye on Star City Games and other related tournament organizers to see if they release any updates to their own policies with regard to alcohol at those type of events. I know that Star City Games has, for example, a very strict no alcohol policy for their opens. That policy applies to judges and organizers as well as to players who are caught with intoxicating substances. So those are things that we will certainly keep you posted on if interesting stuff happens develop in those arenas. And so that's something you should keep your eyes out to if your store is interested in holding those types of events.
Absolutely. I'm definitely interested to see if Star City Games especially will change their stance at all here in the future.
Yeah, we'll let's see. My next SCG is Columbus. Yes, Columbus is coming up in the first week of October, so that's coming up here soon.
And that'll be release weekends for the Return to Ravnica.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome to see. I'm really excited for that. So hopefully we'll get to draft a bunch of that new set.
Yep, and be sure to watch out for me in the side events area where I'll be the side events lead during the Saturday.
Hey, that's awesome. I applied as well, so I'm hoping to get it. That would be awesome to see.
So, all right, what will happen if, let's say, alcohol can cause some people to become intoxicated, and maybe people who are intoxicated don't have the best judgments, right? So, what would you say is like a good line to draw in terms of, is this okay? Is this not okay? Should I maybe talk to this individual? So, what are some things to look out for?
So this is a very interesting question and one that took a while to really get situated and get figured out. Us as judges, we have policy that we have to follow, both the JAR and the IPG, whether we're at competitive REL or regular REL.
Yes.
And we have to follow this policy strictly. Especially when it comes to dealing with intoxicated persons, because neither policy talks about how to deal with intoxicated players. We have to be on the lookout to see if, for example, slurs are being used, a player is being too rowdy, not listening to judges' word, things like that. However, if they're getting a lot of penalties, things like that, there's nothing really we can do outside of just following the policy and applying penalties where where it deems.
All right. So that is an important thing to note, is that it's not against the IPG or the MTR or any of the other official documents to be at an event and be under the influence of alcohol. But with that being the case, it is a thing that could, for example, be lead to some other types of penalties happening. Which of those penalties would you say is the ones that you would be the most concerned about?
So outside of gameplay errors, which you're most likely going to see, tournament errors are going to be a huge thing to look out for, specifically unsporting conducts, minors, majors, which can get out of hand quite quickly. So you'll want to be able to keep an eye out for that as much as possible, and keep a very close eye on these players as well, because they can become a problem in the future.
All right. So in my I guess experience with drunk people, some of the things that I would be looking out for, especially, would be language that's disruptive or directed towards people. That could easily turn into a USC type of a situation. Potentially aggressive behavior, depending on whether this person is a nice drunk or a mean drunk. If they're a nice drunk, then you might be concerned about someone being touched in a way that they're not comfortable with. If they're somebody who is ordinarily, a little bit of a, person who has extreme views on one side of an issue, you might be concerned with them saying things that would be inflammatory towards other individuals. Does that pretty much sum up with what you would think to look out for?
Absolutely it is. Those are all very important things to look out for. There's nothing that really comes to the top of my mind as to what else to look for. So you covered it all, from my perspective at least.
Yeah, and what would you say is like a reasonable likelihood for something like that to happen at an event?
It really depends on the type of person and the type of people that are going to be at the event. Most people have enough self-control where they only have, say, like a couple of beers or a few beers at most, and sure, it'll get them a little buzz, but it won't make them out of control. It's the people who have a problem with not being able to control themselves, having a few too many. That's when situations can start to arise, and that has been my experience in it. Mm-hmm. So those are the things to keep an eye out for sure.
Yeah, and another thing that I wanted to bring up is be sure to coordinate with your tournament organizer. The store owners may have some other rules in place regarding players' conduct that it would be perhaps a tighter line than what the Magic tournament documents would say, but if they're in another person's store, it's important that they follow the rules of conduct that are related to being in that store. So work closely with the tournament organizer, because if they were to, for example, break any of those code of conduct type rules, that would be something that you could bring to their attention, and they would be able to advise you how you should best proceed in that case.
Absolutely. And also, speaking on the topic of tournament organizers, make sure that when it's possible that they hold an age-restricted event, that they have a liquor license. That is very important, and that is something that the building needs to have in order for alcohol to be on the premises while the store is open.
All right, so that's like an even more thing. Like, of course, if you were a store owner, you couldn't bring in like a cooler of beers and put them in your mini fridge and sell them the same way that you would sell normal soft beverages. But you're saying that it would be against the law potentially if someone were to allow alcoholic beverages on their premises and being consumed on those premises and not have a liquor license.
Correct.
So yeah, that's an important thing to keep in mind. The laws in the U.S. Are in general relatively strict as far as alcohol related topics are concerned. I'm not sure how alcohol managed to become so so special, but I think so certain times in the U.S. history would maybe point to some ideas about that in that case.
Maybe just a couple. couple areas in history.
Yeah, back in the 1920s, it was a different time.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine if there was magic back in the 1920s? Like, think about that. It's
Oh,
like,
I think that would be awesome
oh,
right
man,
there. That would be a great time.
they like bust down a speakeasy, and it's like, oh yeah, everybody's like, hey, wait, does this count as my 5 extra turns? Are we gonna get a time extension for this one, John?
That's awesome. Oh man,
Yeah,
I've never thought about that before, and I think that would be
some
that'd be
alternate
really
history.
funny to see.
If I ever invent a time machine, then like that's well, okay. First thing, I'll probably like buy a bunch of like Black Lotuses and dual lands and stuff, so I can afford to do some of this other stuff. But after that, we're for sure coming in with some of those. And I'm not sure about which type of time loop thing I would be violating, but that's fine. We'll worry about that when it happens.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's see. There's no restriction on how much a player can drink, and if they're starting to break rules, then we can take action. So when we are doing that, when we're deciding that okay, it's time to intervene, what are some ideas to keep in mind when you're interacting with someone who's intoxicated?
So there are a few things that you want to keep in mind, especially when you're going up and approaching a player who is intoxicated. From my experience, the best thing to do is to first have a very friendly demeanor and a very welcoming body language. You want to be able to speak in a very kind tone because you want to get them talking to you and not focus on something that could make them potentially upset, which can spiral out of control very quickly. And in friendlying up your demeanor, it also makes you easier to talk to, and that is very, very important. And that's really my first bit of advice. The second bit of advice would be very firm and confident in what you are saying, because if you basically open up and jump down the rabbit hole of allowing a lot of questions to be asked, then things can just get out of control very quickly. You want to get the players back to doing what they're there to do, which is to play Magic as quickly as possible. So you want to be able to inspire confidence. Make sure there are no open-ended questions, things like that. You just want to get them right back on track as quickly as you can, and then you should be good from there.
All right, so that's some good advice. Now, keeping things friendly is a good idea, especially if you might be encountering someone who might be have a reputation for perhaps becoming belligerent. The no open-ended questions is actually something that I would not have thought of, but that makes sense. Like, what would you say is like the importance of that? Like, what kind of situations might occur if you were to like have more openings for them to talk about stuff?
So the big thing that you do not want an intoxicated player to ask is why.
Okay.
And this is why anything, because that gets them questioning things, and that gets them time to like go and roam around and do things that you don't want them doing. You want them to stay focused on the task at hand.
Okay.
And when they're not, it gets rather hard to control. For example, trying to get somebody into your car to, say, drive back home can be a real arduous task when everything else is going on around them. You want to keep them focused and be able to, like I said, get them back to playing Magic, which is what they're there to do.
Right. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's a good point. I suppose with most drunk people having perhaps a deficiency in being able to focus on one thing, it's important to make sure that you make it as easy as possible for them to do the things that you're hoping that they do. And so, what other kind of ideas would you say for good best practices for interacting with a drunk person?
Best practices are to keep your sentences very short.
Okay.
One word answers and things like that, which is usually questions that they're going to ask is, oh, what does this do? And just say as minimal words as possible. Usually with more intoxicated players, you'll have about 15 to 20 seconds rather than the usual 30 seconds to keep someone's attention, and that can be very important because you want to be able to snap off an answer and get them to have a basic understanding of what is going on. So if there's a tough interaction, say like explaining the KCI loops to a intoxicated player, that can be very tough, and you have to explain it from experience as I'm doing this, this, and this, and then I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you want to explain it like that so it's very simple to follow, doing one step at a time, and just keeping it simple. The good old acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That's very important idea to implement here, for sure.
Yeah. Now, this is another thing that I would like to add in here is that a lot of the time, like if a player asks a rules question, the first impulse that the judge is going to have is to explain like the relevant rules and why the answer is what it's supposed to be. If you're dealing with someone who's intoxicated, there's a very reasonable chance that they're not going to care all about any of that stuff. They're only going to care about can I do this thing or can I not do this thing. And the reasoning isn't really important. The reason is because the judge said I could or said I couldn't. And so with that being the case, you want to kind of keep that mindset more in line. Is that if they ask you a yes or no question, just give them a yes or no. Maybe later they'll care to hear about why you can actually sacrifice both those things at the same time. But you don't want to get into, like John said, you don't want to get into any like complicated rules discussions or policy discussions because when you're dealing with someone like that, you're not dealing with somebody who's got the mental processing power to spare to be able to work through some of that stuff. So that's it's a very good thing to bring up.
Yeah. Another good point that I found it to be quite relevant is to always talk to the opponent as well, and make sure that they have an understanding of, yes, this person is intoxicated, so take things a little slower, be kind in your words, don't add salt to the wound pretty much, because that can spiral things out of control, which is something you really want to avoid.
Right.
And making sure that their opponent always has a good understanding of what is going on is very important, because your opponent, say, might get mad that you're intoxicated, or that their opponent is had a few too many, and that can make things be, we can get into some kind of scummy territory there, and so we want to avoid that at all costs.
All right, good point. Is it? I suppose this is one of my things. You've said that there is competitive rel events that you've judged or been at that had alcohol. Mm-hmm. Would you say that like people who are intoxicated are more or less competitive than a normal person?
Ooh, that's a very good question. It all depends on the demeanor of the person as they're getting more and more intoxicated. You usually be able to tell if the person's very competitive normally. They're usually going to get a little less competitive because they might not be taking it as seriously anymore, which can really help things out. For example, that friendly demeanor can really help disarm the player to help get things back on track. That's just based on my experience, though. I could be wrong. There could be players who get even more competitive. So that will all come from more experience at judging these events and seeing how players get. But from my experience, they don't get as nearly as competitive as what they were normally.
Yeah, definitely a thing to keep your eyes out. If you're watching this live or if you're watching this in the future on YouTube, definitely be sure to leave us a comment or message me at judgingftw@gmail.com. I would for sure be interested in hearing your stories about that, because that's something that I'd like to build up a little bit more of a knowledge base about.
Absolutely.
So as we we just talked about some of the stuff that is the like best practices. What are some other things that you might want to avoid if you're dealing with someone who's intoxicated?
So the biggest thing that I want to avoid, and I want to impart on you guys, because this is a mistake that I've made plenty of times, and that is to not be confrontational and to really like raise your voice, because that can definitely cause a major problem. For example, it can lead to fights, whether physical or verbal, and you want to really try to avoid that. So when you're answering calls, try not to be confrontational, whereas you could be, especially at competitive REL or higher level events, you can be more firm. Just try to avoid being negative in your tone and causing more problems than what should be.
Yeah. One thing I heard is that like if you're drunk, you work more on emotion rather than logic.
Absolutely.
And so a big part of that is that body language factors more into how they're receiving your message than it would normally. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big thing to keep in mind. So all right, let's say did you have any other stuff that you wanted to add to that?
Use your communication skills. Because we do work a service in the service industry, we're expected to have some level of customer service skills. Use those skills to your full advantage to be able to avoid those confrontations as much as you can.
Yeah, diplomacy is a very important here. So, okay, what if I, as a judge, encounter a situation with an intoxicated individual that I think I'm in too deep, right? Like I'm not like the right person to be handling this situation. What are my options then?
Don't be afraid to go and grab another judge to help you out and bring into the situation. And if that's not possible, talk to the TO. Try to get the TO involved as well, because that will really help. And because they have so much experience in this industry, their experience of coming in will be able to help out any situation that is possible, because the players, they have to listen to the TO. Right. Absolutely, and they'll trust their TO more than they can trust us at certain points.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that somebody who wants to have an event where alcohol is served, in the U.S. at least this is true, would need to have a liquor license in order for that to happen.
Correct.
So is there any sort of like training or instructions that they would have to go through to put them in a better position to deal with intoxicated individuals?
I'm not too sure on that answer. I believe there are classes that talk about, like risk management classes that focus on how to better handle situations where players are intoxicated. And I'm not too sure as to where you can find those either. I will try to find that information out. And so if you have any questions and want to talk to either of us about that, we can actually get you a good answer.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we will have already done that research.
Absolutely.
So those links, we'll have some resources that we can link you to in the description down below here. And so what would you say would you search for if you were going to look for further information on this kind of a topic?
For further information, you can always look at any risk management when it comes to alcohol. So if you just go to your normal search engine and type in risk management for events with alcohol, you'll usually be able to find a lot of links on how to better approach situations, whether psychologically or physically, how you should not better approach things again, but to better build up a good repertoire as well. So there's plenty of resources out there. I know my fraternity puts out a lot on tka.org. You'll be able to find a lot there. So there are plenty of resources out there.
Yeah, if there is a college in your area, I would definitely recommend talking to some of the people who manage not just the fraternities, but also the college would probably also have somebody who's in charge of all of the fraternities, and that person would probably be a good resource to use. I, in general, believe that a lot of drinking goes on in college more so than pretty much any other kind of organization. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that.
Those people would be a good place to reach out to if you have any contacts, for example, in a catering situation or an event venue. Your people who you talk to at convention centers, for example, may be able to help, because it's not just Magic tournaments that they have. Sometimes those events that they are hosting also involve alcohol. And so I'm sure that they have procedures in place for situations where someone's had too much to drink. Finally, I would recommend if you would go to anybody who's involved with law enforcement will almost certainly have had training on how to handle somebody who's got too much to drink, or any sort of venues where people who would go for the purpose of drinking alcohol, for example, a bar or a club or something. Those people would have probably security would be who I would talk to on staff, which would be able to give you some more insights on what type of behaviors you would want to use and avoid.
Absolutely.
So that's a lot of information. And if you are kind of thinking that maybe this is not for me, or maybe this type of event is not for me, what would you say to a person like this?
Are you, to clarify, for the judge or for the player?
For a tournament organizer. Let's say we're trying to, I'm a tournament organizer. I'm considering having an event where alcohol is served. Would you think it's worth it in terms of the amount of fun or the amount of enjoyment that a person could have?
So from my personal experience in being a part of an age-restricted event, it is an absolute blast, because you do get to go and have fun with your friends.
Right.
As long as you're of age, of course. And I definitely had a lot of fun. I will definitely be going back to the store in the future when I can. I would highly recommend you at least try one event, because it is a lot of fun. I would hope to see the players have a lot of fun, because that's been my experience. If you're on the line about it and you're like, maybe not, I would say just give it a try if it's at all possible. Even if you want to hold it at a venue where alcohol can be served, that's always a good place to start. Just going and talking to other local businesses, things like that, where you can possibly hold this event and serve alcohol at the same point. So give it a try. Definitely consider it.
All right. So let's say on the flip side that I'm a store owner and I'm thinking, hey, I bet a lot of my local players would really enjoy an event like this. What would you? But because I'm a game store and not a liquor store, I don't have a liquor license. What would you think to do in a situation like that?
I would maybe consider going and talking to like local hotels, for example.
All right.
They always have rooms available, or just areas in general where you can go and hold an event. That would be the first place I would think to go. Convention centers as well, if you're in a larger city. And then areas like that have rooms where you can rent out. That would always be a good place to start.
Right. So yeah, if you're looking for for example, a convention center would be perfect, but probably a little pricier. Hotels is a really excellent suggestion. There's a lot of events that, for example, we've held a lot of events in hotels in the PTQ days, not the PPTQ days, but the old school PTQ days. Hotels are kind of a popular destination for stores who wanted to run one of those, but their store wasn't big enough to accommodate the expected turnout. So if you go to a hotel, not only do they have ballrooms that are purpose-built for that sort of thing, not only are they well equipped to handle an event of that type and of that size, because that's something that happens all the time over there, they're also well equipped to handle vending alcohol, because that's another thing that is a popular thing that they would be able to do. So that's an excellent suggestion, would be to meet up with somebody there. Of course, any town is probably going to have some hotels, so even if it's not a very big one or a big enough one to have a real convention center, you probably at least will have some hotels in the area that might be able to help you out.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to go and ask either. It never hurts to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a really excellent point to bring up, is that This is new territory for everybody, right? Like players, judges, tournament organizers, everybody here is coping with the thrill or the dread, depending on who you might be talking to, of doing an event where alcohol is present. And so really when you're in the face of the unknown like this, it's really important to just come in with an open mind. Think about whether this is going to be a good fit for you and your players. And if it is, then, your first event might have some people who are really excited about it. You might have some people who are kind of indifferent to it, but you're really never going to know how people are going to receive it and how people are going to react to something like this until you try it out. And so that's something that we, for me especially, one of my big goals with this broadcast tonight is trying to encourage people to give stuff a try, because when you're in a situation where you can do something new, that's exciting, and that's definitely a possibility to get some good vibes and some good publicity and some good experiences for your player base, but it's also kind of scary. So we're certainly very grateful to John for coming out here to share his experience with us. So the final thing that I wanted to close out on is a lot of the time in this broadcast today, we've been talking about risk, right? Risk management for events with alcohol. Can you describe what risk is specifically with alcohol? What kind of risks are we trying to manage?
So the big risk you're trying to manage is you want to minimize the amount of potential bad things that can happen. And that's really where the term risk management comes from, especially from a college-based standpoint. When talking about risk management, you want to, say, avoid things that can come out of alcohol-based offenses, drunk driving being the biggest one. You want to avoid that at all costs. So you want to be able to take precautions in order to prevent these things from happening. For example, always having something like Uber or Lyft, like a rideshare app, available in your area, making sure that players have a safe way to get home for once the store closes, or make sure that they're able to sober up by that point, and being able to take steps to ensure that the players don't get in trouble and you don't get in trouble as a tournament organizer. It's very important to assess the risk that is going into these events, and there is quite a bit of risk, but the reward is just as much.
Yeah. So it's also important to understand that although the worst case scenario is very bad, unthinkably bad, the chances of a worst case scenario event happening is very small if the risks are properly managed. So for example, a situation might arise where a person has had too many and wants to drive. And if you are doing a good job of keeping on top of things like that, it'll be apparent to you that someone might be trying to make a poor decision of that type. And so it's important to be looking out for that sort of thing, just as you might be looking out for in a normal tournament, say, somebody shuffling the deck and manipulating the cards, or somebody is playing too slowly. You can just as you're watching the floor for magic related things, you could be watching for some red flags. So what are some red flags that you might be able to spot that would tell you that somebody might be in, for example, a point where they might be making a poor decision, or they might be making they might be in a spot where they might need medical attention? What are some things that we should be looking out for in an event where there's alcohol to head off as many of those red flags as possible?
That is an excellent question, and something that we should definitely touch on. The first red flag, and probably the easiest one to spot, is when someone is quite intoxicated and they have their head down on the table, or they're just sitting over in a corner somewhere and just being very, very quiet. And usually you're going to see that they look like they're about to upheave and just not end up in a good situation. So when seeing that, you'll see players like usually leaning over forward, like rocking side to side, things like that. So make sure at that point you go and grab a trash can because they're probably going to need it. And another big thing is you want to be able to listen for certain keywords, like I'm going to get going, or I've got to be somewhere else. And you'll be able to hear that and you get a clear understanding of what they're trying to say as quickly as possible. And you want to really prevent them from, say, leaving the store alone or making sure they do not have the keys, because that can be a very dangerous situation and a big red flag, at least from my perspective of things, because I hear this situation a lot. All right, guys, I'm gonna go get going, and then they'll keep going on or something like that, and that's when I'll go and step into the situation and be like, hey, give me your keys, you're not driving.
Yeah, and how would this fit into with our earlier discussions about keeping things non-confrontational and not doing anything negative?
Being firm and confident in what you're trying to say. Confidence is always key, and that's also goes with giving your own rulings as well. And then the other thing is still keeping that friendly demeanor. You don't want to walk up all mean-like and just be, hey, you're going to do this now. It's like, I'm going to convince you to do this, but in a very friendly and happy manner, keeping a good tone of voice to where they're not going to get upset that you're stopping them from leaving, and you're not going to get upset for them actually trying to leave.
Yes. So that's an important thing. You definitely want to look out for a situation where someone might be attempting to drink and drive, because that's a very serious matter. At all costs, we want to avoid having something like that happen, because that's a situation that could have consequences that affect not just that person's life, but other people. And it could indeed, one of the things that I talk about when I'm working a Magic event, and especially when I'm talking to newer judges, is that what's the worst thing that can happen? If you miss a call, someone doesn't make the top 8, too bad, I guess, for them. But it's not like, something really serious is going to happen. Now, for me, in my normal life, I'm an engineer. And one of the things that I work with is burners. When a burner is poorly designed, that's a more serious situation. You can have a point where you have an explosion, for example, or you could have a situation where a burner releases carbon monoxide and there's a fatality from that. So as a judge, it's pretty easy for me to be laid back, because in my normal 9-to-5 job, it's a situation where, hey, I have to be really looking out for stuff, because there's really serious consequences that can happen if I'm not doing my job. In the case where there's events with alcohol, you really need to be paying attention, because there's really serious consequences that can happen if you don't do your job. And those are the things that we're trying to avoid here. So once again, as John said, things that you want to look out for would be somebody specifically talking about leaving or going home, somebody who looks like they're attempting to walk out of the place. Will you, in your experience, would you say that people who are drunk make more of a deal of stuff like that than a normal person would?
So if they're trying to actually leave the place, they might end up trying to make a bigger deal about it. But if they're just roaming around and just being kind of nonchalant about things, they're going to remain that way when you kind of just hoard them back into the play area, or back into the store, or wherever you may be.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of stores will have also like some sort of a bell on their door, which is really excellent for stuff like this, because you can, have your attention go to the door every time someone tries to enter or leave the building. So that can be certainly something that you might want to discuss with the tournament organizer if they're going to be holding this in a store or like a place that's similar to a game store type of an atmosphere.
Absolutely.
So we talked about that, and we talked about some signs that someone might be in a medical situation, which would be like someone swaying back and forth, or if they're looking down like this. Mm-hmm. Those are things that you want to look out for, behaviors that might key you off that someone's about to either do some vomiting or maybe even worse. Have you so far I have not had a whole lot of experience with people who've drunk so much that they passed out. That's the sort of thing that you probably should not see, because if you're at an event where alcohol is present, then the person who's dispensing that alcohol should have judgment enough that they're not going to be giving someone enough alcohol that could become a situation. But, stupider stuff has happened, and anybody I'm sure who's ever worked at a bar can tell you about the extraordinary lengths that people will go to be able to make poor decisions. So if you run into a situation like that, what is the correct course of action to take?
So if a player were to pass out from alcohol, a big thing to do is call 911, make sure that they are okay, that they couldn't possibly like swallow their tongue or swallow their own vomit. So make sure that they're laying face down, so that their head is straight forward, so they're not accidentally swallowing their own stuff, which can make the situation even worse. So being able to keep a good eye on that, but always make sure that you give the nearest medical facility a call.
Yeah, no, we're not messing around with stuff like this. If you see somebody who's in a situation where they've passed out or about to pass out from alcohol, that's where you want to get the actual medical professionals involved, because this isn't the sort of thing where they'll be okay. You can't assume that that's going to be the case. You definitely need to get the actual medical professionals in to take a look at these people. So that's a very serious warning to those people who are in charge of that. But again, if you are using best practices as far as risk management goes, it's very unlikely that you'll see somebody in a situation like that, because it's important for you to keep tabs on the people who you're giving alcohol to and making sure that those people, if they do happen to end up in a situation where they're, for example, too drunk to drive, they are deprived of the ability to drive. And if they're too drunk to function, then that means that you've probably already given them too much alcohol. So the reason that liquor licenses are a thing that you have to get is because it's important to have standards as far as stuff like this is concerned, and it's important for people who are in a position like this to adhere to those types of standards. And so all of that stuff should be things that the people who are handling the alcohol are well familiar with, because that's going to be a part of the training that they had to undergo in order to get a liquor license.
Absolutely. Another quick bit of information.
Yeah.
Make sure the tournament organizer has access to water, like bottled water.
Great idea.
A drinking fountain, something along those lines, because when you're drinking a lot of alcohol, you get dehydrated. So make sure that you have a lot of water.
Yeah, awesome idea. Does anybody in the chat have any questions or comments that they'd like to bring forth? Otherwise, we're in a position where I think it's kind of close to the end of our broadcast here. John, if you have any other stuff that you'd like to talk about, then we can put those words out here.
So the big thing for me is to say, just stay safe out there when it comes to these types of events. You want to give off the idea that you are being safe in these events. You have very good risk management going on, whether that's access to a rideshare app, access to a lot of water, knowing the best practices, and so on from there. Other than that, have fun at these events. You want to be able to have fun at all events, but these ones especially, you want to get the players excited. You want to get the players coming out and just having an excellent time. So that's my last bit of advice. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to see some very fun age-restricted events out there.
Yeah. One final thing that I'd like to bring up is, if you are a judge or a tournament organizer at an event where alcohol is served, do not partake in the alcohol yourself. You're there to do a job, and that job will be much harder to do if you're not functioning at 100% capacity. So hopefully something like that would go without saying, but I wanted to make sure that somebody said it throughout the course of the night. Thank you so much to everybody who is watching along with us, and everybody who's watching on YouTube. Thank you to especially John for taking the trip out here. We really appreciate you coming out here to share all of our knowledge. And it was an awesome time being with everybody tonight, and I hope everybody had a fun and enjoyable stream and learned some stuff. And until next week, I am Dave Eldon, and this is John Vorderbreuggen. Sign off.
And I'm John Vorderbreuggen, and thank you for joining us at Judging for the Win.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.